Hey everyone, and welcome to the Procreate demo for the piece I call Red Wall. So on this one, I wanted to do something just a little bit different, nothing too crazy, but I just wanted to sort of have some fun with something a little outside of my usual methodology. So this was originally a sketch that I just sort of did. I went through a period of time recently, and still sort of am, where I've been too busy really to do a lot of stuff. So when I finally have the time to sit down, I just sort of do a couple of doodles, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And this piece sort of was one of those. I sort of did this rough sketch that you're seeing here one night a few weeks ago, and then it just sort of sat in my Procreate bin. I have like the folder called Work in Progress, and I just toss stuff in there once I get fed up with it, and this was one of them. And then I just sort of looked at it the other day and thought, maybe this should actually be brought to somewhere more interesting. So you can see me struggling here or there with it before I finally figure out exactly what I want to do and before I actually commit to really finishing it. And so the whole drawing portion of this was done using the fat pencil, which is linked in the description below if you want to see how I made the fat pencil. That was the entire drawing process. As you've seen in the past, I just usually sort of keep the lines pretty suggestive in the rough sketch period. And then I lower the opacity of that layer and then start a new layer where I draw. And then on that layer, as I've explained before, I will, like right there, you can see how that line went right through her nose and right through her lips. I'm sort of creating new layers when I add new sections of the lines, depending on what I'm trying to do with the line, and then I'll collapse them once I sort of figure out exactly what I want to do there. So the first part of this is pretty standard for me, at least, where I'm just sort of going through and tightening up the original rough sketch. I went sort of, maybe I guess you could say overall, I have a little bit of a thinner line than I normally go with. Obviously there are some thick spots, but it's just not quite as heavy, not as variant overall. Just wanted to keep it a little bit more easy breezy kind of thing. And as I was going through at this point, I still hadn't entirely figured out what I wanted to do with it. And so in the middle of me drawing, I was just thinking about, is this going to go to color? If it does, what am I going to do with it? And I thought I'd do a lot of somewhat colorful characters against white backgrounds. I'm just going to invert that. And like in the past, I did the piece called Dye Job, which is in my YouTube just videos, where there's like that bright sort of greenish bluish background, and then she's still really colorful though. So I thought, okay, what if I just did something really strong for a background color, and then for her I did something simplistic. And I didn't know what I was going to do yet when I started it. I just knew that I would probably go with, I don't want to repeat my colors as much as possible, so let's go with just like a bright red background and all that. So I'm starting to think about that at this point. So I just continue to do the sketching, and in order to make sure that I'm always trying to think of where I'm going to go with this, I start figuring out that I'm probably going to do something with the lines where I knock them back. I do something with a bright red background, and then I'm just going to go for a grayscale paint of the actual figure. A lot of you have asked in the past if I would ever do a tutorial on doing something in grayscale and then colorizing it. I just don't really work that way. In fact, just doing something raw in grayscale and leaving it at that is very different for me. I usually color with color as opposed to value first. So this is a little bit of a weird thing for me to do in general. I've done some grayscale in the past, like if you picked up the Masters of Anatomy book, I have a piece in there, but that's all done actually using layers of black with adjusted opacities. And so this is actually a very rare thing where you're just going to see me painting in grayscale. So not only am I going to paint her in grayscale once we get to it, but I also used a brush that I never use. I used in Procreate, if you go to the artistic tab, there's a brush in the top left called acrylic. That's actually what I use for like a majority of this piece. So right here in the background, I actually don't remember what I used. I just used a bunch of messy brushes and smeared it and did a bunch of shit. I just wanted to give it some sort of a bright red look, but I wanted it to be slightly textured so that there's like this implication of dimension. And then you can see here that I put like a slightly brighter rim around her. It's actually not a rim so much, it's just a glow around her. And now I start getting into the gray. So this is all used, this is all painted using the acrylic brush, and I'm just sort of getting a feel for it as I go. I wanted it to have a painterly look, so there are a lot of areas where I don't make it as solid as I would normally, and that was deliberate. But I didn't want it to be overall too messy, so you see me cleaning it up every now and then. This was a very exploratory piece because I didn't know really where I was going to go with it. I hadn't used this brush before. I never painted grayscale, etc., etc. So it just sort of piled up into me just screwing around and trying to figure out what I really want to do with it at all. So you can see me trying out various things. You can see me maybe struggling at times, filling in areas after I've sort of committed to them not being filled in, just going from there. Right now, I went ahead and did that first gray and sort of declared that almost like a mid-tone of sorts. And now I'm moving one layer up. It's all 100% neutral gray. It's not a little cool, it's not a little warm, it's 100% desaturated for at least this entire first portion of the piece. And so yeah, here you can see me just continuing to learn this acrylic brush, see what it does. For my eraser though, I didn't use the acrylic brush as an eraser. I use which you might want to do if you want to maintain the look and feel throughout the entire thing. But instead, what I used was the hard airbrush, the one that's just solid with a opacity fall off. And but then I lowered the opacity down to like 20, or I guess what you might approximate is like 25 or so, just so that I could use that to almost sort of like badly erase away. I wanted to try and keep the handcrafted look and the non-perfectionist look throughout this entire thing. So now we're moving on to the ear and the hair area. So at this point, if you're trying to follow my thought process, since I'm painting the ear, I'm thinking about the hair because the hair is right there and it's just popping into my mind like, oh shit, what am I gonna do for the hair? I don't have a plan. This isn't my normal way of working, so I don't have just sort of the next obvious step. So what I figured I would do, it just seemed like it would make the most sense since I was working in grayscale, is I would just use essentially modifying layers in order to do the rest of her. So I go with the same set of grays across her entire form, but then for her hair or her eyes or her lips or her nose or whatever it is, those are additional layers that are put on top later that are either blacks or whites or some type of a gray that are set to like either overlays or multiplies, and then all those layers are just adjusted. When I say all those layers, it's just sort of to encapsulate it. It really wasn't a lot. This is a very low layer count piece overall. So you'll see now, I mean, this is all just sort of exists so that you guys can watch as much of the process as possible. But this is all just sort of standard following light and trying to figure out how I'm going to represent the form using these values. Whether or not it's true, I'm sure that you could argue that there's some style involved or there isn't or whatever. This is actually one of my least favorite stages of painting anything. I don't really like the flattening process that much, but this process I find even more annoying sometimes because you're trying to find your light and you're doing this sort of big I don't know the word. It's not really like, it's not wash in the sense of wash, but basically what I'm saying is there's just a lot of light that's hitting these portions. So you feel like you're just sort of reapplying a lighter color to all the areas that you already flatted. So sometimes it can get a little boring, I guess you could say. And I feel like the opportunity to really leverage my painting style, or for anybody to leverage their painting style, doesn't come until like the next layer or two, where you get to make like a really dramatic impact with either value or color depending on how you're painting. So when I'm painting this stage, it's actually a little bit on the dull side, to be honest, as I'm trying to find where I'm going with this entire thing. And I probably check out a lot, I would say, during this stage. When I was working on this one, I was watching a movie, and so I was probably paying a little bit more attention to the movie than I was the actual piece, taking a lot of, breaks, which is also why I like doing the time lapse over the live drawing. Otherwise, you guys would have so much dead time sometimes because I don't really have the time to 100% focus to something all the time. But anyways, that's just some insight. So this is the stage now, the next value up, where I feel like I can really do more. I can sort of make a more dramatic change. I can implement some unique choices and really define the form a little bit more. That probably implies that I need to work on some of my process, because if I'm not impacting things too much at certain stages, then maybe I should take a look at that. But to be honest, I don't know if it's that or if it's just the fact that sometimes you just need those foundational layers, and they might not be interesting, or they might not be super exciting, but they're still foundational and they're part of the piece. I think one of the most interesting things about art when an artist explains it, especially to somebody who's not an artist, is just how in your own head you can get when you're in the middle of doing any type of art, and that you can just really beat yourself up in the middle of it, or you can really question it, and you go through all these arcs. I mean, at this point, a lot of people have made a lot of jokes, and there's really funny comic strips and memes and shit based off of that. But it really is interesting how you can be doodling on somebody's ear, and like that one time you drew an ear badly, and somebody called you out on it, it will be like the thing you think about the entire time you're drawing that ear. Or when you're doing your shines or your colors or your whatever the hell you're painting, and you're just thinking about like all the times, and you just really beat yourself up about it. And so I think that you see some of that throughout any piece, especially one like this where you're trying to do something that you normally don't, because you're in uncharted territory. There's nothing comfortable about it, or at least there's less things comfortable about it. So you're just sort of trying all this shit out, and you're thinking to yourself the entire time like, this isn't gonna work. I don't know what this is. This isn't gonna work. I don't know what this is. And you just do that over and over and over again. So at this point, I'm starting to judge where I'm at overall with my values. I start recognizing that there's not a lot of deep dark values in here. Oh, here we go. I'm jumping to now like my highest key value, which is where I have the most fun, really calling attention to some of these shapes, these either shines or these peaks and valleys and stuff. It's really fun to do this stage for me. And you can see me sort of blobbing in a lot and then erasing away again to try and clean up and get exactly the form that I'm looking for there. So I'm looking at my values and I realize I need something darker, I need something lighter. So here's my lighter stage, and then I'll throw in some dark in a second. But you'll also notice I'm sort of operating blind because I haven't put those modifying layers on like the hair or the eyebrows or the eyes or the lips or anything like that yet, which I probably should have, to be honest. But even for myself, to sort of entertain myself, I like holding off on some of those things because they can be kind of exciting to then implement, and you get to see the changes. So here we've got the shine on the eyes, and now we're adding a little bit of extra shine in the ears. Making sure some of those little points that I want to call out really get called out. That's the shine on the distant eye that just got done. I'm just sort of calling out a few other areas that I really want to make sure catch that highlights. Right now, I mean, not that she doesn't in the final piece necessarily, but she really looks sort of metallic right now, especially since everything is like one dimension and I've got a lot of highlights going on there. But then as you start seeing the modifying layers drop on, it starts pulling apart a little bit. So here's the first one, it's hair. So the hair is just a white layer on top of all of it that I believe is ultimately set to overlay. And then I lower the opacity of that. And then the lips was black that then is lowered in opacity and then put underneath my shine layer so that the shine on her lip really stands out. And now I'm going through with a darker value back on my sort of value layers, and I'm making sure that I've got like deeper shadows and harder cuts in order to try and push her dimension further. That's where you see the work in the nostril. And so this is actually much messier than I normally do it because this dark shadow, this shadow layer is on top of all the other values, and then I actually go in and I sample like the nostril, which is actually a composition of the paint layers plus the pencil layers, and I sort of use that in spots to punch in a little bit of extra darkness, like when I get to the ears and things like that. So you can see here by pushing in all this much heavier shadow, it's really helping define things a lot more, and you get a lot more dimension out of her. Now the whole thing I kept a little bit on the messy side. Again, I wanted it to look a little bit handmade, which technically it is handmade, but as you know, with digital stuff we have the ability to really, I I just make things too perfect, and so I tried to stay away from that on this piece, which part of it was that acrylic brush. That really helped with that. And so now I'm sort of in the noodly phase where I'm taking that rim light, or not the rim light, sorry, the red sort of outline. I'm making it a little bit brighter. I actually duplicate all the red and I blurred it a little bit to encroach on the main figure. And now here's the part I'm gonna try and make even slower because it goes really fast, but I put in a little bit of blush, darkness around the eyes. You can see there me cleaning that up, blush in the ears, which is all hard to do in the grayscale because you don't get that redness. And then I added that shadow coming up from the bottom. And the very last thing I did was I actually tweaked the shadows to be slightly redder, which you see flip in right at the end, right there. And then here it is just one last time so you can see it. These are the last touches. And that's more or less it. It was a really fun piece to try and explore. So I hope you liked it. Thanks for watching. And if you did enjoy it, I hope you consider liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.